Hey all, Zach Lokes. This video is about edible ecosystem design as it pertains to ecosystem form, function, and potential. This is content that's part of a body of work in my books, as well as courses that we run through ecosystemu.com. So what is an ecosystem? Well, people talk about ecosystems in the sense of, oh, there's a woodland ecosystem or a riparian ecosystem or a prairie ecosystem. But when it gets down to the details, what we're talking about is living organisms interacting with their environment. So birds and creatures and soil life, plants, trees, interacting with each other through symbiosis, companionship, competition, and interacting within the context of their environment, the atmosphere, hydrosphere, and lithosphere. So what is an ecosystem? Well, it is all this interaction. But it's important to understand that we can identify different types of ecosystems, such as woodland or prairie. And part of how we identify them is by understanding that all ecosystems and the species, the organisms within them, have form, function, and potential. So a woodland ecosystem, for instance, like in the image here, has taller trees, sun-loving trees, shade-tolerant species, shrubs, bushes, ground covers. This is the characteristic form of the types of plants that are within a woodland ecosystem. There's also a diversity of animal species and soil life, and they have their unique form, their size, their shape. But ecosystems also have different functions, and the species within them have different functions as well. This can be understood as, the relationships that they create with each other. And sometimes those relationships are, just based on the context, such as, a larger tree might shelter an understory tree, like a maturing golden birch sheltering a sugar maple that is just a sapling and would actually really not like being exposed to the full sun. So it's benefiting from that shade being cast. But is that benefit symbiosis? Is it an evolved benefit, or is it a companionship? Is it a context organized benefit? But regardless, this is function within the ecosystem. Some organisms and plants, nitrogen-fixing bacteria and, say, clover, fix nitrogen and put it into the soil, or a locust tree, or a pea shrub. And this is a function of these organisms within the ecosystem. All ecosystems also build potential. So an example is all of the leaf fall in a forest, building up organic matter in the soil, or the carbon sequestered in a prairie ecosystem, the prairies that stretch across North America, or formerly stretched across North America, and Eurasia, and also the similar type grassland ecosystems in South America. These ecosystems have massive carbon sequestration potential, and that potential is stored in soil carbon. So these are three characteristics of ecosystems, and this dynamic is at play whether we're talking about looking at a boreal biome and the ecosystems that occur within the boreal biome. And ecosystems are scalable, so you can think of like the whole boreal forest of northern Canada is a boreal ecosystem, or you can look at the boreal ecosystem that occurs along the western shore of James Bay, for instance, within that boreal forest ecosystem. And there are specific plants and organisms that are there, right? And interacting there and in the environment there, the context there. But we can also talk about a prairie ecosystem, or we can also talk about, a temperate woodland ecosystem or a tropical ecosystem. So regardless of the scale we're visualizing the ecosystem and studying the ecosystem, and regardless of the type of ecosystem and its context within the world's biomes, we will see that they have form, function, and potential. So, and these are really important because how do I mimic wild ecosystems for landscaping, for farming, for city planning? We do it by observing these wild ecosystems, situating ourselves in our context. What is our environment, our soil, our climate, the various ecology that's already right where we are, and mimicking a wild ecosystem that grows or grew naturally, because we could be talking about restoration, not just landscaping, could be actually wild ecosystem restoration. But edible ecosystem design is about creating ecosystems that mimic the wild ecosystem's form, function, and potential, but with a complement of edible and useful plants with high benefits, high amounts of ecosystem services for human communities, for the environment as a whole, as we are starting to transition to a better way of interacting with our landscape. So we do that through mimicry, and we look at the form. Woodland ecosystems, like the image here, for instance, have layers of trees and shrubs, and some are, large and branching, and some are small, and some creep along the ground. So we make sure to balance that with this pattern and ratio of different types of plants with their form. But we also create this patterning and ratio with the functions of these different organisms within the system. And we're just looking at plants here and just a specific guild, but we're creating an organization of the plants that might shelter, the plants that might thrive and pioneer in the sun, the plants that might creep and hold the soil and protect it against heavy rain and erosion, the plants that flower throughout the spring, and others that flower in the summer and the fall to create a continuity of pollination services. We are mimicking all those different functions in the designed ecosystem. So, and they're building potential. And part of building potential is once we design and plant this system that has form and function that mimics a specific ecosystem type, like a woodland or a prairie, then we allow it to go wild. We allow it to build its potential. And we talked about organic matter, the leaf fall that builds up carbon, the grass that dies away, it's fixing carbon into the soil from a prairie. But what other sorts of potential do ecosystems build? Think about that for a moment. What occurred to me is all the potential in seed. All of these plants are growing and flowering and fruiting and creating seed. And any one seed that's planted, like a cherry seed, grows a cherry tree, flowers, many cherries, many seeds. So we're building up the potential of seed. In ecosystems, seed is always building. It is, being eaten by animals and building potential in the health and vigor of the ecosystem life. It is building potential by being dispersed and sprouting and growing new plants that produce new seed. It's building potential by being buried in the soil horizons and being added to the seed bank of the ecosystem. Seed banks that, can be released in times of disturbance, such as after a fire or after a flood or after, a landslide. So ecosystems have this potential, like seed and organic matter. And so what we do when we mimic a wild ecosystem, we emulate that form and that function, those layering, that diversity, those different services, and then we allow them to go wild to build potential. But this is not wild like haphazard. We're organizing it, and we're building that potential by managing it in an organized fashion, such as, all of the debris that's coming off trees. We might chip it and mulch it down for access paths around the ecosystem, but still contributing organic matter to that soil. Or leaf fall, we might rake it in and around the tree to contribute while keeping other spaces passable and organized. So ecosystems are wild, but edible ecosystem design is about organizing that ecosystem that we are planting. So how do we plant an ecosystem? Well, what we do is we create an organized layout. Here you can see that this ecosystem spot of 25 square feet is centered around a key species, a fruit tree. And we're using the form of the tree as a function to be a trellis for the grape. And we're using the sunny side to grow certain types of beneficial plants to us, like strawberries. And we're understanding that the shady side can grow asparagus because there's no leaves on the tree in the early spring. And the asparagus can grow, and then later it can frond out and produce large amounts of organic matter, which we can mow down at appropriate time and mulch down to feed the soil as well. And there's flowers for pollination habitat. We're taking that form, function, and potential, but we're laying it out in a grid in an organized way that's balanced as part of this ratio. So that is, the basics of design and then planting it in a way so you can see how it actually plays out. But then what about propagation? What about spreading your ecosystem? What if your ecosystem is successful and you want to increase its size? Well, then it's about understanding how to take cuttings of scion wood, nice twigs from your fruit trees that are about pencil thickness, and grafting it onto appropriate rootstock. It's about saving seeds, maybe even especially from seeds from plants that are performing particularly well, that seem to be more site suitable, and even harvesting suckers like from raspberries where they sucker up. And there's lots of ways of tapping in and managing your various seed suckers, scions, even spores in order to propagate and spread an ecosystem that is performing well for you in your landscape or on your farm. So we want to spread these ecosystems and all of their benefits. And you can see the benefits in an edible ecosystem. You can see the colors. They enrich your eyes. You can feel the textures. They enrich your skin and your touch. You can smell all of the fragrance, those essential oils that are going in, and they have benefits to your body. You can taste and feel the fresh nutrients from the fruits and the herbs and all of the nuts and anything you might have growing in an edible ecosystem. So there's a lot of benefits to all of your senses in an edible ecosystem. And we can talk about big benefits like food security, where we have ecosystems that have built potential. And so they're able to actually self-regenerate and provide food with low input from human management and low input in terms of supplies and fertility. Remember, the ecosystem is functioning now, right? And it's building potential. So it's increasingly functioning and becoming resilient in the face of change. And your home or your homestead or your farm is resilient in the face of socioeconomic change, as well as the ecosystem itself being, resilient to climatic environmental change, right? So these are really big benefits, but we can also talk about the benefits of, carbon sequestration and cooling your yard, contributing to the reduction of the urban heat island effect and the reduction of stormwater flow in cities. Many edible ecosystem spots have these big landscape benefits, and large farm landscapes that are turned into ecosystem style management have these benefits as well, where you have edible hedgerows with diversified farm plots or market garden plots, right? So there's a lot of benefits here, but there's also just that feeling of being immersed in an ecosystem. Like I started by saying, all these senses are being stimulated by the edible ecosystem. This is good for your immune system. This is reducing anxiety. This is improving mental clarity. All those benefits that researchers find are happening from forest bathing, spending time in wild forest areas, actually are really enhanced when actually bathing in food forest or bathing in edible ecosystems, where you have the added benefit of being in a wild space with smells and colors and touch and sounds, but also you're actively able to eat optimally fresh herbs, berries, fruits, nuts. So anyways, this is edible ecosystem design. We've talked about form, function, and potential. Please check out my books here, and you can see our courses at ecosystemu.com. All right, grow on. We'll see you next time.